Opportunity to come in and meet with you. I enjoy being in schools. I've been around a long time. We've had three, I think, very great meetings today in terms of reflection and conversation. A little bit about me. I spent 30 years in public education, teacher, coach, administrator. I went to Gardner-Webb University as a Dean of School of Education for 17 years, and now since 2017, I have been consulting. So I got about 55 years total in education, and my wife has 38. We got this goal whereby we could maybe make 100 as a team, but that we got to stay healthy, I guess, for a while. But I'm here just to share some things with you, get you to reflect a little bit. Not like Dan said, I'm not here to say we're going to do this, this, and this, then we're going to watch and see if you do it. I'm just going to share some things that have happened for me. And this is about teacher expectations and student achievement, acronym TESA, TESA. I will say, I have a lot of passion for this program. It is probably the best training I've had in my career. As in the early 80s, I was a classroom teacher and a coach, and our school as a faculty went through this training, and it changed the way I saw my behaviors in the classroom. It changed since that time. It's helped me help others take a look at themselves. And it was a process of different, what they call domains within the program. You're doing a 30-minute hereabout. We did 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. We did what they call a domain or a strand or a topic, and then we were in teams of 4, and we did peer reviews for each other or peer codings, so that once we covered a particular behavior, we were able to look at ourselves and see if we were following through with it. And I'll explain that a little bit better as we move through. And when I first heard about this and we're going into it, I thought, this is not for me. This is everybody else. I got it down pat. I'll sit there and be quiet, and I don't need this. And I found out I was totally wrong about that. There was definitely room for improvement, and there's always room for continued improvement. I will say it has changed me as a speaker. It has changed me as a trainer. Here 50 years after I went through the training, it still influences how I present, how I teach Sunday school. And I think as we move through these particular strands of this, you'll understand why I say that. Because it has become a habit and an effective habit. Very frustrating when you're not able to, or when I'm not able to demonstrate the behavior as I was taught for it to be. We'll start with looking at strand number 1. It's called equitable opportunities. So think about your classrooms. And I'm going to tell you how this I'm going to give you a real practical example how this happened to me. The theory here is that every student in your classroom should have an equal number of chances to participate, voice, answer questions, and you say, well, I do that. I felt like I did. But once we went through this process of actually having someone come in, so every time this was a seating chart of the room, every time somebody came in and did coding, when you asked a question, you got a check. And the idea at the end was to get a copy of this that this person handed to you. And you very quickly saw that you left people out. And I've seen it. I go into a lot of classrooms throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, into a lot of schools and do the same kind of conversation. And as I've done that, I see opportunities where most work is done along the front of the room. teacher's talking, maybe asking a question. The kids on the front row throw their hand up. They typically end up seems like on the front row. So research tells us if we allow students to sit where they want to, your good students will sit up front or down the middle, which is a T shape. Your low-performing students, if given an option, will sit in the two quadrants to the side. So what I'm seeing has held true. We're involving kids who either know the answer already or can contribute to the discussion already, and not in making sure we involve all kids. And we have a responsibility to do that. And even beyond the opportunity to do, you need to provide help or assistance to those, allow time for them to answer, and then be able to delve into their answer if it's not where you need. We will typically, especially if we have an observer in our classroom, we'll only call on those people we know will have the right answer. Or we will avoid those people we know that never do have an answer. And the theory behind this particular program is that we find ways to get them all involved in it in an equal number of times. Let me give you what happened to me. So we go together as a faculty and we talk about equitable opportunities. Then we have 6 weeks by which we go code each other's behaviors. And my first experience with someone coming in and coding my behaviors, I was teaching math at the time, and I asked a question and I said, like, what is 5 times 5? And we were taught to wait 5 seconds after the question before you call on somebody. That's an old concept by Madeline Hunter, who came up with the 6-step lesson plan. So I waited 5 seconds and I called on a young man in the back of the room named Rodney. He sat in this back corner. I was in front of the class. So when I called on Rodney, Rodney looked up and said, "Well, why'd you call on me? You never have before." So he validated the whole theory that we typically leave kids out of the process. I had taught Rodney what? He is not capable of answering a question. He is not capable of learning math. And over a period of time, that builds into his head. Not just Rodney. Rodney's happened to be the one to speak up to me. So that became a conversation in our next training as I shared that with the faculty. This stuff is real. We teach kids what they think they're capable of doing. It's called self-fulfilling prophecy. Through my behaviors, I was teaching Rodney that he couldn't learn. And others as well as Rodney. Rodney, again, was something that has stuck in my mind. Now, Rodney turned out to be a very successful auto mechanic. He's back home, still practicing that, still working at that. Good kid. But I cheated Rodney, as probably as many others did too. So I want you to, as we go from this point back to your classrooms, think about how kids are being involved. And I've been in, like I said, a number of classrooms, and we're involving kids who raise their hand. We're involving kids who have certain seating patterns. And then we got other kids who are in the back on their phone, texting or whatever they're doing, or doodling, or not being part of the learning process itself. I'm not saying that as a critique or an evaluation. I'm saying it as an observation. I've seen it in this school, and I probably in 20 schools every month at some point, at least 10 or 15 every month. Some months more than that. And seeing a lot of that going on. So we are not doing justice to our kids because of what? Because of how we behave and are not providing an opportunity to learn. Does that make sense? All right, the next piece is proximity to learner. And here's what has changed me more than anything. The TESA literature is based on a book by Jerry Brophy and Thomas Good called Looking in the Classrooms. And the The concept there is that you should come within arm's distance of every student an equal number of times during a class period. Now this varies a little bit if you're doing group work or projects and some of that kind of thing, but as a teaching mechanism, as a teaching strategy, you should walk and be in touch with the students. It increases the engagement, it increases the relationship between the teacher and the student. And I've tried to do that since I've been in here, and I still do it. When I teach Sunday school, I have to go to Sunday school early and move the chairs so that I have room to walk. It became such a strong habit of mine, and I'm such a believer in what the theory says about proximity, that it drives me up a wall if the room is set to where I can't walk.
Please come to the main office, Adeline Hatcher.
So, I walk down the hall after lunch. What we're seeing is a lot of teachers sitting in their desk while kids are busy. And then we got kids who are not busy, who are not engaged. And I can go to almost any school and find a number of those situations taking place. So we've got to get up and move. That helps us with classroom management, it helps with engagement, and it helps build relationships. I can't overstress what this habit, once you begin to adopt that, or once you begin to see that, you see the difference in what you're able to do. I went to a middle school in Charlotte, Mecklenburg several years ago and did the full-fledged training with a faculty. And the lady, one of the teachers there spoke up very abruptly and says, "You don't know what you're talking about. You've never worked in a middle school. You don't know anything about middle school. These kids are awful. They're terrible. They don't have any home. You just can't control them." I said, "Well, I take issue. I do know a little bit about middle school. I've done some vertical projects and involved in that." I said, "Do me a favor, try this." And we did them on the 6 weeks rotation. I'd try this and then bring it back to me when we come back together. She came back the next training we had and said, "I need to owe you an apology." She said, "I've had the best month in my career." She was struggling with discipline. She came back, she said, "I've had the best month I've ever had in my whole career because I tried what you said. I was getting around the room, I was involving all the kids, and it made all the difference in the world." You know, that's a good story. You can't guarantee that kind of thing's going to happen. And management is important. Probably not as big an issue as here as it is some other places. But the bottom line, with the management goes the engagement part and the learning part. Our third one is responding to these opportunities, affirming and correcting students' performance, giving them praise. Again, observation shows me that when we involve kids and ask them questions and they answer it, we say, "Right, good, that's right." And what this principle teaches us, we must go beyond that. We must confirm their answer, but give them the reason for praising their learning. That's a good answer. It shows that you understand the need to be able to analyze. It shows that you have done some critical thinking, and that reinforces the whole concept of why they're there and what benefits that class is to them. And as that spreads across the whole faculty and more people are doing that kind of feedback, then there's a growth of the learning culture itself throughout the school. This is something I think because of the sake of time, we tend to cut that short. It's also something that we have to be very sincere about, or it gets to seem a little bit fakey. It helps the student understand that they're being accepted and that they're feeling that you appreciate what they're able to do. And I think in the time we're in now of aligning things to standards, we can also align that feedback to the standard itself. That's a good response. Shows you understand this part that is aligned to standard, and we even call them by numbers, so that the students become and develop ownership of the standards themselves. It's not just something we're laying out and something we're striving for. There's some ownership on their part. Part of that didn't show up in this one is also the level of questions and an equitable opportunity. I gave an example this morning. If I go to a student and ask a very recall kind of question, let's say, who discovered America, she could most likely tell me, right? If I walk over here and I say, can you tell me the conditions that led to the discovery of the New World? And what have I just told her? You're not smart enough to answer that question.
That might be a lead-in question then.
Yeah.
The diaspora and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
And there's ways to delve into that. You're right. That's a good response. That shows you understand that. But the point being, we have to make sure that we're giving questions of critical thinking and learning to the students who normally have not been involved. And we typically tend not to do that because we know they won't or can't answer that. And then, like she said, there's ways to say, well, can you help her? Can you give her some clues? Or you could give some clues so that you could get to the higher level questioning. And then the last one is personal regard. Moving within arm's reach is some personal regard, but the others is to express or take interest in a student based on their life and what they do. I might say, you know, I saw your artwork posted down the hall. I like the way you use colors. Or I saw you track meets. You really have worked hard and trained well to participate. Finding something that we know about our kids so that we're building that relationship, that there is some regard for who they are and what they are. What does that do for your instruction? They respect you for knowing something they do outside of the academic area or outside that particular course. They appreciate you showing that interest in them. This one, as far as coding goes with this in the program, this was probably one of the hardest things to do because we tried to catch a lot of them coming into the classroom and keeping up with a number of students and what they might actually do. So it's a little bit difficult. I like the way you started every meeting today with celebrations. That would be a good way even with a classroom to celebrate some of the things they have been doing. If we pull up what I want to do is go through what would typically be a lesson and let you give me some feedback on how well I have followed the principles of proximity, equitable distribution, maybe the level of questions, and we won't get into the personal regard since I don't know any of you that well. This is the concept. And then I'm starting the teaching phase of this. My personal work, publications and research has dealt with creating learning cultures, individual and collective learning culture, of creating organizational ability to build capacity. I've worked with police departments, I've worked with churches, I've worked with banking industries, I've worked with medical field, and then I've worked with teachers. All organizations have a level of culture that is important for them to address in terms of meeting outcomes, and as they learn and create a culture where they can be collective in what they do, then meeting those outcomes becomes a whole lot stronger. It's a process by which when you walk into an organization, it has such a feel about it that you know that the culture is striving around learning or production by those people who are part of that culture. And we raised this question this morning, what is culture? And someone said, you feel good about being here. That's not a totally incorrect answer, but feeling good about working at this high school, that's the climate. So climate and culture are not the same thing. they are climate is part of the culture itself, but you ought to be able to walk into West Iredell High School and immediately get a feeling that everyone is committed to building capacity, everyone is committed to continuous improvement. What would be some of the evidences of that? If I walk in this school as a total stranger and I'm looking at what I think the culture might be, what would I be wanting to see, or what would I see to give me some indication? How about the level of questions that are being asked in the classroom? Is there critical thinking being asked for, as opposed to what? Simple recall.
DOK 2 and 3.
I'm sorry?
DOK 2 and 3.
You know, you're deep into or getting into a depth of knowledge, as evident on your wall here, and that's part of what that is. Depth of knowledge will be a different culture overall for the entire building, because it is not only deconstructing standards, it's also creating question stems that allow for deeper thinking as it aligns to the standard that you've deconstructed. What else would I see?
You would see like our lesson plans and our standards posted on the walls.
That's an excellent answer, because standards are aligned to what we're trying to get done. I like the lesson plan concept. Now, what should the lesson plan show?
They should show what we are doing in our classrooms.
I think it goes beyond that. Let me play devil's advocate on that a little bit. We do lesson plans, and it's more of a scope and sequence of things. How do we plan for critical thinking? How do we plan for problem solving or analysis? Then what we set aside is what we want to accomplish, states the fact that we want to include prompts for critical thinking or projects for critical thinking or lessons, not just what we do. I appreciate you bringing that up, because, you know, teaching is involved with three things: preparation, delivery, and assessment. We're all been trained in delivery, and we're probably, as a whole, pretty decent with delivery. We're getting our feel of assessment and understanding data, but we're not doing a good enough job with preparation to come into the setting to be able to make sure those other two are in line. Even lesson plans and templates we use for lesson plans are more a listing of things you want to get covered at what amount of time and what particular material, versus here are a list of questions that I might ask that help get at a deeper level of understanding the content. All right, so we come into this West Iredell High School, and we begin to look for what the learning culture may show to us. That this particular literature indicates that there are 5 ways to change that culture, wherever it is, whether it's not good here at West Iredell, or where it's fair, or where it's excelling. There's always looking for continuous improvement. The number one contributor is the disposition. What does that mean? What is a disposition? If I came in the building and walked into your classroom, what am I looking for that tells me what your disposition may be?
Am I smiling? Am I happy to be here?
Sorry?
Am I smiling? Am I happy to be here? Am I engaged? Am I ready to teach? Or have I got a bad attitude and I'm going to be a constant complainer?
All those are good answers, and I think they align to what one is. Can I add to that?
Sure.
The other part of it is, do you believe all kids can learn? Do you have the disposition that all kids can learn? Not only can they learn, but can they all learn at a level that you're striving for? There's ways to measure that. Not all of us believe that all kids can learn. There's times that I'm unsure of that myself, But along with everything she stated, there also has to be an overlying disposition throughout the building that we collectively can make a difference. We can teach all kids, and we will help each other do that. That's collective efficacy, or in this case, a collective learning culture. Yeah, being happy is important just from a getting along with people, but you got to have the mindset. I can take any kid that comes to my class, and I can teach them. If we get to that point where we're all practicing that and helping each other with that, that's part of the beauty of your PLC on Thursdays, is that you're beginning to share some of those strategies and some of those ways of dealing with that. Not everybody has that. That disposition should drive you not just to wait till Thursday meetings. If there's an issue, you know somebody you can turn to. A real PLC is a learning community, not a scheduled time for a learning community. Are you open? Can you have critical conversations? Can you help each other to the point that it's often not even comfortable to say, but it's for the best benefit of the kids? The second piece for improvement is professional, and should be professional and personal experience. Einstein once said, knowledge comes from experience. Everything else is only information. Meaning that we learn and grow and develop when we experience things. We have to get to the point we ask ourselves, what do I need to do to build my ability, to build my confidence in who I am? Some of that professionally would be workshops or conferences. Personally, it could be reading more, it could be visiting each other's classrooms. There's a number of personal things that you could implement or think about implementing in order to change who you are. We all have roles in life. You're a teacher. I've been a teacher, a Sunday school teacher. I play golf with the same group. I'm in a golf group. I'm a spouse. I'm a grandparent. I'm a sibling. There's about 8 or 9 roles that I have. You may have more or less than that, but somewhere in that neighborhood. We have developmental needs in all those roles. These are your developmental needs. What do you need to do to be a better spouse? What do you need to experience to be a better spouse? What can you arrange for yourself to do to be a better parent, to be a better grandparent, to be a better Sunday school teacher? So it's the same thing for classroom teachers. There are things that we need to do to develop ourselves. How often? Every day. You got 40 teachers here, roughly 40 teachers. Well, we had 40 people who showed up every day, so I'm going to do a better job than I did yesterday. Then tomorrow you come in, I'm going to do a better job than I did yesterday. Time is an issue, obviously, but you got personal things going on. But the continuous improvement means that you're looking for ways to get better all the time. So run that to the pyramid. We'll get back to some of these when we get back together. But I want to show you what this evolved into. This is the same concept. We're talking about a culture here at West Iredell High School that is based on how much you believe in capacity building and how much you believe in continuous improvement. You can ask yourself that individually. You sort of know what's going on around you. That determines the culture. Is the capacity building belief and the capacity building strategies there pervasive throughout the school? Is there a belief in the philosophical understanding of continuous improvement? All that is supported by three major pillars: a common language of learning, a language that students and teachers alike, and maybe even the parents, know and understand. Do you have one here at this high school? Does West Iredale High School have a common language for what learning is?
Sphere.
And it varies somewhat from school to school, but very often people don't know what that is. Do the kids know what the common language is?
No, mine don't.
Is it something we can teach?
Yes.
Mainly by repetition, if we repeat it often enough. The middle block under that is routines. What are their expectations? What do you have for your expectation for yourself and for each other? If I teach beside the room beside of Mr. Cooper, then I expect him to do the very best job he can do every day, and he expects the same thing of me. So when we expect that of each other, then we're striving to do the best job we can do. And the top pillars, there's relationships. Do we have the relationships between learners that builds on that relationship that we trust each other, trust teachers, students trust teachers. We trust that you're here for the purpose of making my life better or helping me do better in this school. Now, if you look at this model, around the outside of it are the same developmental needs that we had in the last graphic. That's because it's supposed to hold this pyramid together. We need the disposition, we need experiences to build knowledge, we need a culture that says we're going to learn something every day. Shared responsibility. Do you do what you do because it's the best thing to do? We used to say we were empowered to do things. We take that out of the language now. We're not necessarily empowered because empowerment leads to minimal performance. Shared responsibility means we're each doing whatever it takes to get the job done without necessarily being told. So shared responsibility is a big piece. We all do share in that, whether we're teaching a tested course or a non-tested course. And then reflection and assessment. Do we look at what happens in our classroom and say, did it work? Did it not work? What's next? What do I need to do next? Again, these are developmental needs. You need to develop the ability to do that. Even if you're good at it, you need to make it better. And then social cognitive theory. Social meaning between people, cognitive is learning. Social cognitive theory tells us we can learn to do things better if we find somebody who does it better. And we do four things. We pay attention, we understand what we're seeing, we practice what we see, and we have a passion to be like that. Watch it, understand it, practice it, and have a passion to do it. What does that lead to? An improved performance. Who could you watch? Who do you know that you could go see and do better at a particular role that we mentioned? Mine is being a spouse. I know I got a friend who is a better husband than I am. So I watch him. He opens the door for his wife. He pulls a chair out in a restaurant for his wife. He helps her put her coat on when it's time to go. I watch that. I understand what he's doing. He's making her feel better about who she is. And it's a simple example, but it's the same thing of finding how to be a better teacher is finding those people who can do it better than we can do it and go learn about that. So, critique what I just did. I think I walked around pretty well. I didn't ask higher level thinking questions. Tried to, but we didn't get to that. It's hard to demonstrate a typical lesson when you're going to something this theoretical, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it might look like in the classroom if we begin to reflect on what this will do for us and do for our kids. What are your takeaways from this conversation?
It's easy to get discouraged by students. They don't always want to learn. They're not excited. It's easy to get discouraged. But it's good to be reminded there are things we can do that can help our classrooms go better. We're not powerless. We maybe can't fix everything, but what we do can help.
That's a good answer because it shows that we are human and we do get frustrated sometimes when things don't go as well as we'd like for them to do. But this tells you that it's not always the kids' fault. We have to look at ourselves. What else?
Kind of validated a lot of the things that I do.
Yeah.
I kind of like the time.
And that's real good. I didn't start any of this conversation to say that none of this was happening or nobody was doing it. I was just sharing some experiences and some literature that really support that. When I come back and around in some classes, I would hope to see more proximity than what I have seen thus far, if it calls for it. Thanks for that answer. That shows some good insight.
I practice proximity. I walk constantly. I'm within arm's reach of all the students, but I had never reflected on exactly how engagement was
Tied to that.
tied in and how, not necessarily, because I mean, some of the students who interact with me are on this corner, some are over here, some are over there. So the interaction, the model isn't the same because my classroom, I teach the culinary class, and so we have big cafeteria style tables, and so it's a little bit different than a normal classroom setup, but not calling or actively engaging. I allow the kids, I think, to control the conversation and the higher level questioning that we do, because I do a lot of that, but they're getting control of it more than I am. So I'll call on people that are not engaged, and I do that often, but I haven't reflected on who am I missing? Who is getting ignored or left out in this conversation? Because if you're over there on your phone, I'm gonna pull you back into this conversation. And it might embarrass you. Be like, so can you, help so-and-so figure this out? But I'm really reflecting on who I'm leaving out in that space. And I didn't recognize before the conversation that was something I could be actively monitoring. I know it'd be hard. I think in the middle of, sometimes I feel like I'm on a stage. I used to perform a lot. So when I get up in front of the classroom, I'm engaging with them, I'm talking to them, but I still feel like sometimes I look at the kids like I used to when I was performing. Everything is on the top of their head. So I have to make eye contact. And so, I don't know, just really reflecting on that part. Like I say, proximity and walking, I don't sit down, ever. When I'm independently working, I don't sit down, any of that. But I didn't realize, is there a possibility that I feel like I'm engaging everybody, but who's missing?
Yeah.
I know somebody's got to be missing. And that is teaching and inadvertently teaching a student that they're not smart enough to learn something. My eyes just went, whoa.
That's an excellent reflection. You know what drives some of that, some of your issue is the lack of consistency across the building of doing what you say you do. And that is great that you are now, especially now that you begin to realize you need to look at it a little deeper. But if we aren't consistent throughout the building like that, then kids go from one room to the next room and they think it's okay not to be engaged. And that's not being critical of any one person. You'll see that in every building you go into. And that's what the culture is about. Do we have a culture where everybody sees it the way you just said it and do something to make it work? Thank you for that.
I want to bounce off what you said because I feel like a few of us tend to like ignore the nice, quiet, shy kids, and those are the ones we gotta look out for because we always just expect, oh, they know what they're doing, they're always doing a good job kind of thing. But I didn't notice, like I never like Stewart and Garcia pointed this out observing me, but it's always literally the shy, quiet kid, but they're always doing what they're supposed to. But I never end up calling on them because I never want to put them on the spot. And I think that's like one of those where we gotta just start doing it, get them more comfortable. But it's usually that group of kids, I feel like.
For sure.
And we said from the start, we're not here to say do this, do that, do this, do that, but at least your reflection shows that there's value in just listening to what was said, even though some of us would rather not be here. But I appreciate that, the depth of how you looked at that. This is not an easy topic, but it's certainly one we need to have conversations about. And I think consistency is a big thing. How do, I'm just throwing out questions. How do we deal with that sometimes? I honestly feel like, and I've read, this is not just me, I've read this in research. We need to have an understanding that it's okay if someone is not as consistent in their behaviors that are productive, to be able to go to them and say, I can help you a little bit. I've had some issues and this is how I've dealt with it. Would you be willing to have a conversation? We take that wrong. We take it, actually would make us angry, but the teaching profession needs to be able to help each other and be critical about it to the point, who's it for? To help the kids and get it and take those feelings off of our shoulders. Well, I appreciate your attention. And certainly I understand the time of day and that kind of thing. And for those who maybe didn't get as much out of it, I apologize for that, but we're trying to give you something to think about more than anything else. And so thank you for what you do, and thank you for what you do for kids.
Thank you, Dr. Eury.
Thank you.
So just